And we are live. Phenomenal. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Ask Me Astros weekly coffee talk, where we get to sit here for about an hour and chat about astrology with you. We are Vivi, Henriette, and KristaLyn and Sofia, and we love to just go through the astrology of the week and imagine that we're having coffee. Today, I'm having water. Vivi, I think on Instagram you mentioned you're having tea, but if you have coffee or anything else, depending on whatever time of day or preference you have, that's great too. We're just going to chat about the astrology like friends. So welcome.
Welcome. I'm actually just writing. I'm letting people know in this. Oh my God, I can't type. That if people are watching us right now on Instagram, that they can go over to YouTube and actually chat with us.
Mm-hmm. I am also, if you're watching on my personal Instagram, I am following the comments there too. So YouTube and Instagram are perfect.
Okay. Yeah. I have no, I can't have the bandwidth
screen. Yeah.
Oh Lord. Yes. I'm Tulsi Rose tea because this is a lie. I know how to make a cup of coffee. I just want to let everyone know that I can actually make a cup of coffee. I just wasn't prepared and could not go out and get my coffee. But I do love a coffee shop. I couldn't live in a place without them.
Yeah, I do appreciate them. And we're going to be in Seattle next weekend together. Maybe we'll be able to find some coffee out there. We should be able to.
Yeah. Definitely venture out. So we're going to Norwalk, which is not in Seattle. Tukwila, is that the name of the city?
Yeah,
Tukwila. Yeah. I just end up places and not know where I am, which has its advantages. But yes, we will have to venture out to the city to get some coffee. But I'm excited to see you and all of our Astro pals IRL. Yeah. And this is your favorite week ahead. So I'm going to let you start by talking about why you're so stoked on this astrology.
Yeah. So, I mean, I have do you feel this too as an astrologer? I almost hesitate to be like, yay, good astrology, because bad things are still happening in the world. And I'm not saying that bad things aren't still happening. I'm just saying that of the challenges that we may be facing, this week is a bit of a breath of fresh air. And I hope that we all inhale deeply and take advantage of it. We had the Jupiter Cazimi over the weekend. And it was so funny because speaking of coffee, I walked into my regular coffee shop that I go to every Saturday, the one I took you to when you visited. Yeah. And the person behind the counter was like, she identified them as pagan friends, were telling me that there's something really special about today and manifesting and Saturn. And I was like, So it threw me off so much. I had to go sit down and look at the transits and be like, it's Saturn's day. But I just did my astrology for the next week this morning, and I'm really excited about the full moon in Sagittarius and everything going on with it. But it turned out, of course, it was the Cazimi of Jupiter and the Sun that they were saying was good luck and manifesting. And they got it confused with Saturn's day. So hopefully anyone who was manifesting that day, it worked out beautifully for them in the best way. But I did clarify for the person behind the counter so that if somebody else did come in, they would know exactly that they were talking to Jupiter instead of Saturn that day.
I love it so much. I love that you are spreading the good news at the coffee shop. It's interesting too, I think of the moment of I hate the word manifesting, but I'll whatever go with it. But I like that's you're planting good seeds, which I think is the thing to do on a Cazimi.
Yeah. So I was really glad about that too, because it helped me realize. And then later that day, I recorded this video. I'm going to be featured in a John Edward television show thing for his channel that he's got going. Nice. And I was going to originally record it tomorrow, but I'm giving myself as much opportunity as I can to sort of rest before Norwalk. And so I decided to do it on Saturday, and I realized I did it right at Cazimi. And I'm like, well, that's got to turn out well, I'm sure. And that's the best thing about being an astrologer is you tend to remember the transits after you've done something. So if you're ever wondering, does astrology get in the way of you living? No, you will forget that astrology exists until you go back and check a lot of the time. So according to Larry, that's the sign of a good astrologer.
Yeah, it's almost... I think we can get, I mean, I know you're really into electional astrology, and that's fantastic.
Yeah.
I think we can get kind of over obsessed with it though, and just forget that we're actually this is a living, breathing practice, and we are just communicating with the cosmos all the times, whether or not we think of it. And there's something about just feeling into a moment and going back and going, oh yeah, that was that was that sort of Kazemi moment for me. That was the thing that I was doing then.
Mhm.
Should we kind of back up for people who are like, okay, what is this Jupiter Kazemi? What are they talking about? Can we just like back up for
Yeah.
people?
So Jupiter Cazimi is truly any of the visible planets will have a Cazimi with the sun pretty much every year as the sun moves through through the zodiac, which the sun does every year. So yeah, Angela, you're going to be learning not this week, but next week about Phocis and Mercury's morning set. So that'll be fun. Angela is a student in my Patreon.
Oh,
But
I love
so what the Cazimi is actually ancient astrologers said that the Cazimi was the planet being as though in their throne because they're right there with the sun in that moment of perfect conjunction. And so this is the Cazimi moment where the planet gets to be reborn as the planet, or depending on which planet it is, right? In this case, the sun caught up to Jupiter in the sky. And so Jupiter sank into the rays of the sun, got unmade, in so to speak, and then went into that crucible of the forge of the solar rays and being within 15 degrees on either side of the sun, being under the beams, being combust with the sun, getting destroyed. And then that perfect moment when you are aligned with the sun to the degree, and within about 15-degree minutes is considered Cazimi. That's the rebirth moment, that phoenix
it.
moment.
And you can think about it, like I know that astrologers love to use this metaphor, but it really works. The caterpillar and the chrysalis moment, right?
Yeah.
Because me being that like when suddenly there's just like it dissolves and there's goo, and then we're going to spend the next amount of weeks, whatever, as rising out of that before we get Jupiter visible again,
Yeah.
to see what new meaning Jupiter has in our lives.
Yeah. Yeah. And both Jupiter and Venus are under the beams of the sun right now. Venus is slowly catching up to the sun. She's going to catch up to the sun in about the second week of June to have her Cazimi unfortunately, in Gemini, which isn't a bad thing, but it would have been really extra sweet to have it in Taurus, which Venus rules. So you get that really amazing, like talisman worthy moment. But later this week, we do have Venus and Jupiter conjoining on the same day as that full moon in Sagittarius, which is ruled by Jupiter. And at the same time, Venus will then be moving into Gemini.
Yeah. So I think just to go back up about the Jupiter Cazimi too, it's worth noting that it is happening in Taurus at the final degrees, or it happened.
Yeah.
And something about like, because what, Jupiter was in Taurus for about a year, right? A bit of time.
Yeah, it was May like 15th last year to May 25th this year.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. And so something has been happening in that part of your chart, and it's Taurus and it's slow and there's been a lot of action there, and you probably have some idea, but you can't quite see, for most of us, I would say, we probably can't quite see the full picture yet. And so I think there's something really beautiful about this Cazimi. Felt like a little bit of a send-off gift. Like we planted some really beautiful seed there. And then as Jupiter starts to make its morning rise, I think that's when we'll start to realize what fully transpired during, or what was planted during that time in Taurus. What kind of garden, if you will, is growing in the Taurus part of our chart.
Yeah. And I think one of the beautiful things that Jupiter will likely, we're going to notice in hindsight more than likely, is that Jupiter afforded us this slowness, this rest, this sort of abundance of not being busy. Because now as Jupiter goes into Gemini and really expands that energy, where Jupiter is considered to be in detriment, but it's, I believe like one of the ways you could explain that is because Jupiter would like to expand a thing and Gemini gives Jupiter 8 things and Jupiter has to decide how to expand. Like, do you expand all of them a little bit? Do you expand one of them a lot? And so there's this, this vying for attention that we're going to have now that Jupiter is going to enter into Gemini.
Yeah, I was doing a lot of, and it's beautiful, of course, because the sun is at 0 degrees Gemini while we're talking. So we're just starting to move into this big Gemini energy. And I was doing a lot of meditation on Gemini this weekend. I have a moon in Gemini, so it's something that I'm like, think about. And I had this vision, and I think someone else, I'm sure in my astrology studies, I think someone else has used this analogy, so I don't think it's an original one. But thinking about Gemini as like can be like a swarm of bees
Mhm.
all like with like different pieces of information. And that can feel really chaotic, right?
Yeah.
I just imagine, like, I literally just, it just is a visual here. I imagine Gemini, we're just like all the thoughts, all the things just buzzing around. And of course, as you said, Jupiter, that magnifying glass, like Jupiter wants to expand a thing, but like, what does it mean when we're just expanding this swarm of bees? And something about maybe even coming back and pulling from that knowledge and that maybe that slowness we learned in Taurus to
Mhm.
sort of help us cope with like the the chaos before us
Yeah.
of just like what's it mean to like how do we navigate the mental clutter.
Mhm. Yeah, and I found it really interesting, for us that Norwalk did a decent job this year. They're pretty consistent with their time every year. And there was one year where it was like, why are we having it at this time? Because we were so close to an eclipse or something like that. But they're consistent every year. It's not as elected for an astrological conference. But this year, they have that kicking off their workshops on the same day as this full moon with the benefics conjoined. And so I'm really hoping that it's a really nice benevolent Norwalk, as well as we usher both Venus and Jupiter into Gemini along with the sun over the weekend. They're going to be talking about it.
Has it ever been, I mean, this is like in person, this is going to be my third Norwalk, I believe.
Yeah,
But
same.
like, has there ever been like a not, I'm like, ooh, what is a not benevolent Norwalk like? Because we
Yeah,
know the astrologers like
I remember 2022, there was something happening. And I remember on the last day, somebody got injured. And my first reaction was, where is this sign in your chart? Because we had to figure out like what was going on. All the astrologers descended on this one person. Some of them were medical astrologers. Some of them were just like, what's going on here? And it was just so funny to see astrologers trying to make sense of this event in someone's life because they had developed this huge rash. And it was something to do with Mars that weekend. And it's really funny.
I'm just laughing like a group of astrologers and someone has like a medical emergency and there's like the first thing they do is like, who has the chart?
Yeah, well, no, it was the first thing I did was take her to where we could get some, I think it was Benadryl. Like,
Okay,
who do we
thank you.
need here? But then also, let's make sense of this. What's going on and how long might it last and like what might have caused it? I think Jason Hawley ended up helping out a little bit with that one.
It reminds me years ago, I once in a different life, I was a partner in a restaurant and I like, speaking of Aries head injuries, I just
Hmm.
slammed my head with the door and it was just head injuries, like blood gushing everywhere. Sorry, trigger
Yeah.
alert. And just everywhere. And the chef, I was like, you have to take me to like, I have to go to the ER, like whatever, clinic, whatever, to take care of this. He's like, okay. We get in the car and he's like, I'm sorry, I have to do this. I have to pick up our like delivery order or like our grocery order before like on the way to the hospital because if I don't, they'll close. And I was fine, but it's a little bit of like, the light astrologer thing of like, but
Right.
first, must chart.
But first, yeah. Wait, everybody, write down the time. As long as we can study it later, we're good. Yeah. Yeah. My husband actually does that now. Something will happen and I'll be frustrated and he'll be like, okay, but that happened at like 12:13. I'm like, thank you. It's really nice to be able to go back later. It's like how things will be funny after the fact. Things will make astrological sense after the fact, but you're still totally entitled to have whatever emotion you need in that moment. So
Yeah.
really helpful. Like you can't bypass the astrology just because you know the astrology.
Yeah.
You still have to go through it, which I think is something that a lot of astrologers, myself included, especially during Saturn return, we tend to be like, oh, well, I know it's coming, so I'm going to handle it gracefully. And it's like, how gracefully do you handle a Mars transit? Like what is that? What does grace look like with Mars or Saturn or Mercury?
You know, I've been thinking about Mars a lot lately too. And I just you say Mars, and I've had this keyword. I think it came up when I was having my Dada astrology talk with Rose Blakelock, who's an amazing astrologer. And I was like, people talk about Mars, but like it takes a long time to learn how to wield a sword. We should, so depending on the Mars transit, there, I think sometimes just knowing it's going to happen, can help us
Mhm.
move through with grace. But also when, you know, we don't have a lot of power to prevent fires in our life. I'm just
Mhm.
thinking about actual Mars transits I've had.
Yeah.
Thinking of like, what is your most intense Mars story? We'll sort of pause for a
Oh
moment there.
gosh. I have an intense Saturn story. I
Okay.
have several intense Saturn stories. Saturn is the malefic in my chart. So
Okay.
all of my intense stories seem to be more Saturn focused. I did, you know, my fall in Rome in traffic the other week, which has still not fully healed. That was a Mars story for me. Yeah. Sorry, what did you say something?
No, I forgot about that because last week you
Yeah.
were wearing your glove thing, and I just thought it was fashion. And so
Yeah.
my brain still had
We're still not all the way there, but I got tired of the glove.
that was your Mars story.
Yeah,
So can
so
we
my Mars story was
flash
falling in traffic while the moon was culminating with Mars and Mercury in Aries. You know, falling in injury in traffic at that time in Rome. You know, that feels pretty martial too. Um, yeah, but my Saturn stories are, you know, during the Saturn return, being on a call with an influential person in the writing world, being told to share my writing with them and having them tell me I just wasn't talented. Was a very hard Saturn story for me. But then also the moment that I died was a Saturn story, Saturn on the descendant. Fortunately, Jupiter was there too, so it didn't stick. But that's like one of my favorite ones is to think about. It was May 2000, and Saturn was conjoined my descendant point, and at a certain time in that period, I did in fact die. But then I came back. My
and I'm
son
so
was nearby too, but the Saturn had already passed my son by that point.
you know, it's funny. I pulled doing something different today. I pulled a tarot card for our conversation. I'm like, oh, let's see
Yeah.
what comes up. I'm like, I pulled the death card. It makes sense. I've had like a meditative experience in the desert on my end, but I'm like, oh, I think we found the death card. There you go.
Yeah. Sorry. It's hard for me as a Scorpio moon not to have a conversation that doesn't somehow segue into those themes at some point. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, and that's why we love you. It's interesting. You've had more like Saturn stories. I have a lot of Mars stories, but we've all heard about Mars stories of just like hitting my head, car crashes, things on fire.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah. And Pattern Scribe makes a great point that I'm prolonging my healing by not wearing my glove, but I have so many things I need to do and it's hard to type with the glove on. And I literally spend all day like this. So I took the glove off and then I was feeling good for a while, put it away, and then it hurt again. So
I would think it's you though. Isn't there some sort of like technical workaround we can do, like having like a voice to text or something? I
I
feel we can
mean,
make this work for you.
probably. A lot of my stuff is phone calls, and I just think better typing, which is weird, I guess, to say. But I do have Capricorn in the third, so my communication is much better in writing. But yeah, I could. It's a matter of my Taurus sun being
Trying to get
really
you a workaround so you don't
yeah,
keep your injury forever.
yeah. I agree with that. But it's only been what? It's been 2 weeks, so yeah, maybe. I'm wondering if I was using the wrong aid. Like, is it more of a compression thing than it is a stability thing? And so I really don't know at that point.
Oh, hello. Do you know Sid? Is Sid P your
I
friend?
do not know Sid, but it is great that you are here, Sid. Hi.
And thank you for coming from India.
Hmm.
Oh, we got a heart. This is so cute. I don't know where the heart came from, but hello. Thanks to everyone whoever gave the
Yeah,
heart. Thank you.
yeah. I know
Um,
you're fun.
how are you feeling about? I've been like out of it for the last 2 days. So, any thoughts as we can sort of digest the Mars North Node? It was a lot this weekend. A lot of
Mhm.
stuff happened. Um, any thoughts around the Mars North Node
Yeah.
conjunction?
Well, so as this seems to happen, right? We had the Jupiter Cazimi, and everybody's like, it's all the astrologers were like, this is the luckiest day of the year. This is the luckiest day of the year. And I was like, well, also, like it would be if it were just Jupiter conjunct the sun in Taurus, like great. But Mars came to meet the North Node. And the last time Mars met a node, it was October 7th. So, I was wondering if we were going to get some kind of something going on around those kinds of themes. And of course, we did have that helicopter crash. Um, so, and if you haven't seen it already, I don't want to harp into it because lots of people have lots of feelings about it and everybody is entitled to them. And I'm not educated enough to draw a conclusion
Yeah.
on this. But if you look up the helicopter crash that happened over the weekend and see that, I mean, that's definitely a poignant moment for what's going on in the area of the world that's getting a lot of attention right now, rightfully so. So that to me was, you know, there's the Jupiter Cazimi saying yes to whatever else is going on. And of course, we get, you know, the Mars on the North Node, making things pretty, I don't even know a good word to use, you know, complicated is a great word.
Yeah. And also, I feel like when we just like reduce Jupiter to luck, taking that aside, just
Yeah.
going back to Zimi, it is so reductive. And I think the beautiful thing about sometimes Jupiter transits is they show us that, like, I don't know, it's a little bit of like what we actually need is different than what we want, right? So
Mhm.
whatever sort of like moment was being planted there, seed that was being planted there, I don't know if we could just say like this is lucky, or or it also makes me think of how oftentimes the best things happen in like sometimes like with Jupiter transits, you'll be really thrown off. You're like, that was weird. That wasn't like
Mhm.
that comfortable, or that brought up something a little difficult. But then you look back and you go, oh, that was actually very lucky. And so yeah, that's just my
Yeah.
thoughts around when we reduce anything to say this is the luckiest day of the year just feels problematic to me.
Yeah. Yeah, and you know, I like Eric Purdue posted on Threads probably a week ago talking about the translation error between calling the fortunes the fortunates and the infortunes the unfortunates and saying that they bring misfortune. And
Mhm.
so just saying that just because a benefic is a benefic planet does not mean it only does good. And just because a malefic is a malefic planet does not mean it only does bad. There's constructive, and then there's, you know, there's unfortunate, and then there's like so many complications that go into it. Pattern Scribe gave us a good word calling it a dynamic weekend. That's fair to say. Dynamic
Yeah.
is a good word. But yeah, just thinking about the planets, you can't just put them into one bucket. You know, they have multiple expressions. And it's insane to think how many expressions they do have when you go into it. It's like, you know, Jupiter as the father, the judge, the priest, the whatever, the benefic, the, you know, expander, all of those things do fit. So when you see this, you have to say what side of Jupiter is going to come out, given the context of the chart and given, you know, everything else that's going on at the time. Because I think you said this a week or two ago that the sky is always talking. The planets aren't always talking to each other, but the
Mhm.
entire sky is expressing. So it's important to remember that.
Yeah, and I think it's also important. I love that you differentiated between the types like of what a benefic can bring, because sometimes also, right, like same way that malefics can bring really great constructive help to our lives, benefics can also be like too much. Like, so this idea that it's just all good every time we see something, I think of like with Venus, I think of like, oh my, we know like too much sugar can actually make us sick.
Mhm.
And it's the same thing with Jupiter, right? Like Jupiter often in charts can be like weight gain, like too
Yeah, I was
much.
going to say, especially in Taurus, right? There's this overindulgence. Yeah.
That is, I think, one of the funnier things I've been seeing on the internet. It's like people really excited to lose the Jupiter and Taurus pounds.
But it's a thing, you know, when you think about those themes, I hesitated to say it earlier, but I was thinking the same thing, you know, when we start getting into expanding our mind, or at least those air qualities with Gemini, that might actually be something that most people view as positive.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked a little. This is just such a I'm just thinking about the layers and layers and layers of this, and I like the
Mhm.
fact that we are in this, as we talked last week, the an era of air. Am I
Yeah.
using the correct word? Yeah. And then we
Era.
have this era of air, and then with the Pluto now in Aquarius, it's gonna dip back for a moment, but whatever. And this, I feel like this Jupiter and Gemini is really just gonna kick some stuff off. We're gonna be like, oh, this is what
Mhm.
it's about. This is the next X amount of years, 20 years, whatever. We're really gonna like, or 200, if we
Yeah.
will.
Well, and it's important to that cycle, that era that started too, because not only is Jupiter going to trine the point where that conjunction between
Yeah.
Saturn and Jupiter occurred at like the first degree of Aquarius in 2020 around the winter solstice that year, but also this is going to bring our Saturn Jupiter square. So the first hard aspect between the two of them, the first quarter of this 20-year cycle for what they're in right now, between the conjunction to conjunction, which is about 20 years, this is the first time they're going to meet and say, hey, where are we at? What's going on? And, what do we notice that's happened since 2020? And that's a lot to think about when you think about how far away 2020 feels to us now.
It feels both like, is there like, I feel COVID I don't know how to explain how COVID changed time, but everyone I talked to was like 2019.
It was yesterday,
I
but it's also 10 years ago.
Yeah, like I don't know I don't know what happened. Where am I? Like
Mhm.
it's kind of like the same way I think people in like I'm in California, and sometimes I think it's like weird is someone who's like from the Midwest. Like I see people that are just sort of timeless. Like they just
Mhm.
like never like there's just no changing in time, so you just kind of stay the same. You're like, oh, it's now, but it's 20 years ago. And I think that
Mhm.
that's kind of like what COVID did for all of us.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it really warped our sense of time a lot. Um, even thinking about, I saw headlines today that are still reacting to things that happened in 2020. Governments are making decisions about things that they're still bugged about from 2020 in certain states. So I'll allude enough to the headline that if you want to look it up, you can find it. But it's just very fascinating to me that, we may come across something this summer as Jupiter and Saturn kind of deal with their square over the next probably couple months to a year. We're going to be feeling this, how do we feel about that? Are we going to get reactive backwards a little bit? And are we going to build on that? Or what choices are we now going to make that are educated by what we've learned? I hope we do make educated decisions. And I do hope that we make fair ones that consider as many people as possible.
Absolutely. Can you talk a little bit about, and I know you could probably bring up Luna,
I
your
have,
sponsor software. It'd be interesting to look at when Jupiter both makes its rise as a morning star, but then also makes the trine. And then we also know that Jupiter is going to go retrograde in Gemini. I feel like all of those
okay.
points in time feel relevant to like how we're processing what's happening now.
Yes. So let me just make sure I'm pulling up. I have 2 Luna charts prepared for this week. So I'm going to pull up the one that has, I did the chart for the Jupiter conjunction and full moon. So fun fact, you can see that we have Jupiter and Venus conjunct each other opposite that moon. She's not full yet. She's going to go into Sagittarius to get full, but that perfect opposition actually does happen with all of them at their energetic degrees. So I thought that was really interesting to point out for astro nerds out there. But what we want to look at here, of course, is Jupiter. And so Jupiter, let's go, we'll go by like a 3-day thing. This will help us get there faster. So we had the Cazimi over the weekend with the sun. And then if we go back, we're going to be looking for Jupiter being away from the sun by roughly 15 degrees. And Vivi, if you want to help me do the math on that, because we know how good I am at that, just to get, let's get away from here.
I'm like, where'd the sun go?
At 12.
Blind leading the blind.
4. So that puts us at, we're beyond
12.
beyond it there, right?
Wait, 12? Wait,
12
because it's 12 degrees to 24 is 12 degrees.
Yeah, so we needed a couple more. We do, where's the sun now? 6 to 23. So we're almost there. So we can see that Jupiter, around the time Jupiter conjoined with Uranus, which would have been around the 26th of April, had that phasis moment where the sun started catching up to Jupiter by speed. But what we notice is that Jupiter is falling into the rays of the sun. So this is actually considered Jupiter's, I believe, evening set? Yeah, Jupiter's evening set towards the sun.
Oh, oops. I keep saying morning star, evening set. Yeah.
Yeah. So because the sun would be up first, Jupiter is an evening star. The sun goes down. You still see Jupiter on the horizon until the next day here, where Jupiter is now under the beams of the sun because the sun is so bright that the star Jupiter is not visible anymore. It's too close to the sun to be seen. So that is under the beams. Then we jump forward to this past weekend. So if we pop forward to, it was May.
Wait. Pause for a minute. We are looking at the moment. Let me just look at this chart for a moment. Sorry.
Let me make the calendar go away. I'm trying to make the calendar go away. It's really hard to do in Luna. Like, I don't know how to make it actually do that. There we go.
There we go. Okay, so I just want to just my brain right now. So 6 to 10, that's 14. So right now, Jupiter in this chart is like 17 degrees away from the sun.
Yeah. Okay. Somewhere around that.
So that means it's so in this chart, it's just starting to enter visibility as an evening star.
Enter invisibility because the sun's approaching it. So the Jupiter is falling into the rays of the sun. It is setting into the rays of the sun as an evening star. This is Jupiter's evening set.
Got it. So, but I see what, and it's going to keep going. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
It was the outer, like, because I could, like, when doing it for the Jupiter and like Jupiter and Mars, it always like confuses me. Like Venus and Mercury and be different because it's when it reaches. I'll let you talk.
Yeah, when you get to the planets who are at a slower speed than the sun's average speed, it gets wonky. So any planets that are beyond Earth do move slower than the sun in the chart, and any planets that are closer to the sun than Earth is move faster than the sun in the chart, moon included. And so what you see is like Venus is catching up to the sun. Meanwhile, the sun is catching up to Jupiter. And so you have this speed thing that is something that just needs to be memorized in my experience. But the trick is, if it's closer to the sun than we are, it's faster than the sun in the chart. If it's further from the sun than we are, then it's slower than the sun in the chart. And that is actually called the Chaldean order.
Oh, wait, we went backwards. Okay, this is why I'm confused. Okay, that's why my brain is like, you're confusing me. No. Yes. I was thinking about going forwards. We're going backwards now.
Yeah, we went back to
that's
back to the evening set. And then I'm going to do the Cazimi, and then we're going to do the rise, and then we'll do the trends.
Okay, that's why you confused me. Got it.
Yeah,
okay.
Sorry.
So I was like, wait, if I'm getting confused, we should like clear this up for everybody else, because like I'm an astrologer and I'm like, wait, what just happened? Okay, so you're going back and you're looking.
Yeah, we went back to April 26th.
Got it. And you're looking at when Jupiter was falling into the sun, becoming invisible. Fast forward to this Cazimi moment, and then I was thinking about Jupiter's rise as a morning star, so I do have that right. Thank God.
We're going to go forward to April 18th. Yeah.
Okay.
So that when we do April 18th, not April 18th, sorry, May 18th, this is the day that Jupiter is separating from it here, but Jupiter had the Cazimi with the sun on the 18th over the weekend.
And let's pause this for a moment really quick. So to go back to the April 26th. So for people, because I think like, okay, cool. So Jupiter's entering invisibility. If we go back and look at our lives, at like that April 26th, why is that important to think about? Like symbolically in our lives, what does that mean for us?
Yeah. So as Jupiter disappeared from visibility, Jupiter could not Jupiter as well as Jupiter would like to Jupiter. Say that 5 times fast. So Jupiter started, if you imagine a rocket coming back into Earth from orbit, it starts burning up. And pieces of it fly off, and it gets, it loses a lot of itself in the initial descent. And so this is like Jupiter going into the rays of the sun. A lot of it is burning off. And what you're going to be left with, I always like to compare this process to, I think it's like smelting and forging, because you'll get rid of all of the excess materials until only the pure metal is left. And that metal is now white hot, it's malleable, it can be reforged into whatever you want, it can be sharpened, it can be shaped. And so thinking about the Jupiter and Taurus story, thinking about where Taurus is in your chart perhaps, and thinking about how the Jupiterian influence may have gotten softer, as though you put a dampener on a trumpet. And so the trumpet's still playing, but it's softer and it's not able to reverberate as much as it was. And now we get to the Cazimi moment, where we're going to start playing a new song, perhaps, if we're going to use that.
And I think this is why it's important to what you're showcasing, is that late April, by the way, that Jupiter was real close to Uranus, right? So that moment that it felt jarring, like that's when Jupiter, as you say, started getting like burnt up, like the debris started to be shaken off. So it's interesting going back to this idea of like, oh, the Cazimi, the luckiest day. Well, Jupiter hasn't really been Jupitering at its best. So keep that in mind, right? And which is why, and it's kind of after it leaves the Cazimi moment, which it had, right? It's also not going to be Jupitering as good as it could. So,
Mhm.
which is again another reason why, as we're going to get into this, what's kind of been planted here, you're probably really not going to feel until
Mhm.
Jupiter has regained strength.
Yeah. And Jupiter is a slow moving planet. So what Jupiter is
Yeah.
doing takes time to show up. So it is,
Mhm.
just to emphasize the point that you're making, which is totally true and valid. Jupiter is one of those hindsight planets because we look back on how much we grew, or we look back on, wow, I'm really glad that happened that way because now I get to see this. Um, Especially when we look ahead, as we will in a minute or two, to the whole retrograde process. So this is Jupiter getting reborn during the Cazimi. Then we're going to pop ahead. Are we ready to pop ahead?
Yes, we are. Thank you.
I'm going to shoot us forward by like 2 weeks because it seemed like that's a pretty good one here. So we're going to look for Jupiter to be about 15 degrees now behind the sun. The sun caught up and is now outpacing Jupiter. So Jupiter here, we're going to need more space between it. We have the sun at 18 Gemini, Jupiter at 3. So
Yeah.
Jupiter is still moving ahead in Gemini. Jupiter is going to get to 4 next, but the sun is simply moving faster. So the sun is gaining more ground. And so we see the sun, Jupiter is still at 3, the sun's covered 2 degrees already. So right around 14 to right around here, I think we should be getting in the 15
So
degree range.
4 to
So
20
would have been 19, right?
4 to 20 is 16. So that's like
Yeah.
19.
So
Yeah.
right around here. Yeah. So in this period of days, we're going to see that Jupiter now, where we would have seen Jupiter in the evening just after sunset, now we're actually going to look at a different time of day, at a different part of the sky. We're going to see Jupiter rising before the sun does. And this makes Jupiter the morning star. And so Jupiter will now become visible out of the rays of the sun as a morning star. New life, new cycle, ready to go, ready to Jupiter in Gemini.
And also thinking about, I think this is really significant too, because when we think about an evening star, right, we think of something that's more reflective, tends to be sort of past oriented, maybe processing. And I think this doubling up on this newness is Jupiter as a morning star. So not only is it a new Jupiter, but it's maybe Jupiter bringing in new themes, maybe initiating things.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. In a new sign too.
Yeah.
Jupiter's emerging in a whole new place. So new is definitely a key word I would bring here, especially for the mercurial sign, I would say, of Gemini. For Gemini being an air sign, mutable, and just, ready for the next thing. So I would hope that there's some kind of anticipation. Yeah.
So this, for just letting people know, right? So this is what coming towards the early part of mid-June, this is when you can maybe start to like think about, maybe take some awareness in your own life that maybe some of these Jupiter things are going to re-enter.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the next thing we would look for is roughly around the time Jupiter trines the sun. Is that what we're going for next?
Yeah.
For this, I can actually be a little bit quicker because I can just double tap Jupiter here in Luna, and we'll just go to when Jupiter retrogrades. So Jupiter is going to retrograde October 9th. And so what we see here is Jupiter is at about 21 degrees in Gemini, where the sun is around that same area. The sun is trine to Jupiter by sign. When we see that, we know a planet is preparing to retrograde.
Well, Jupiter.
Well, the outer planets, yeah.
Yes, the outer planets,
Mercury
yes.
and Venus are exceptions. The moon does not retrograde, but the outer planets, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. Yeah.
I'll do it at the trine, which is beautiful to think about, like the trine, thinking about the maximum peak for any planet, like its relationship with the sun is like, oh, this is the best. And it's like, and now we go back.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to do that again. Yeah. And it's funny because again, Mercury and Venus don't get to trine with the sun. So only the planets that receive a trine with the sun will have their retrograde at those periods as well. And it's the moment of hold up, I'm stopping. I want to indulge in this moment a little bit.
Okay, I love that you said that because like when you the image that came to me was there's this like meme like circling the internet about this, like, I think it's like a raccoon that just keeps like jumping in this like giant blower machine and going back around and around and around. So I just imagine the like Jupiter like, coming off the slide and be like, that was awesome. Let's do it again. And now
Yeah.
it's like running, and like
Yeah.
the retrograde period is like
Just doing it again. It's like there are a bunch of
yeah,
dog videos of that too, where the dogs just want to go on the slide over and over. Yeah,
yeah.
I love that. Yeah. So Jupiter will retrograde while the sun keeps moving. So Jupiter is going to appear to move backwards in the sky from our perspective. So as if this were sunrise, right? Jupiter would already be up in the sky. So Jupiter is going to be visible in the early hours of the morning and before sunrise. And then the sun will go throughout its day, and that, we'll see it again late at night until halfway through Jupiter's retrograde, which is actually when Jupiter has the opposition with the sun. I can probably pop forward by a bit to do this. I'm actually going to go ahead by weeks at this point, just to give us, because of course the sun has to get into whole new signs. So this takes months to happen. Yeah. Retrogrades with outer planets are the slower kind. So where are we at now? Almost there. So the sun will be right around here is a good place to give it a chance. So we see the sun coming up to Mercury is having a moment here too, but the sun being at 16, Jupiter being at 16, this is our curtailed passage, as the astrologers call it, but it's the opposition with the sun that says we're halfway through this retrograde. And then we simply look for Jupiter to trine the sun again. Again, easy to
let's pause there. Let's pause the curtailed passage for a moment.
Yeah.
I also just staring at the screen, I'm thinking about like, because we know what Mars, Saturn, Jupiter, whenever they're in opposition to the sun, they're going to be retrograde, and in opposition is like a standoff between two planets. And I imagine like a little unfair because it feels like Jupiter's like a little drunk having to like stare down the sun. I just want to put that out there.
Yeah. Well, and it's not quite fair for the outer planets, to be sure. Like if you're feeling dizzy and you've got to answer to your father, that's a lot.
So just like thinking about, if anyone has this sort of opposition in their natal chart, it's something to like digest. Yeah. But can we just go into curtailed passage for a moment for people who have no idea what that means and the significance in the chart, but then in our lives as well? Yeah.
So curtailed passage, honestly, it's just it's the hardest astrological term for me to remember, bar none. I always have to bring myself around to it. Even as I said it the first time in this recording, I wasn't sure I was going to remember it by the time it was supposed to come out of my mouth, but we got there. We did. So curtailed passage is this halfway point. What's happening here is it's the passage between being a morning star and an evening star. Again, same kind of transition as the conjunction, but the opposite, quite literally.
So we're going this now because when we had the conjunction with the sun, Jupiter began its rise as a morning star. And so this curtailed passage, we're going to see Jupiter start to make its rise as an evening star.
Yeah. So if you can imagine the sun rising, when Jupiter was over here, Jupiter was already up. So Jupiter was a morning star because the sun would come up. You can't see the sky. By the time the sun sets, Jupiter's down here. Jupiter is not visible for us because it's below the horizon. And I should do it this way. But if we imagine this as the sunset, so if we imagine that this is actually the sun being at this angle, at this point, Jupiter will now be visible on the eastern horizon at sunset. So we're going to flip this so that when the sun goes down and you can see the stars, now you want to look the opposite direction and you'll see Jupiter.
In the night sky.
In the night sky.
Yes. It's interesting to think about these 2 points, right? So if we think about the Kazemi moment, and there's this emphasis on like luck, but we could also just say like rebirth, right? This is the moment, as you said, when the metal gets forced to its essence and we have this opportunity to create something new. And there is this like birth of a potential that happens at the Kazemi. You could say like any planet or Jupiter here. And then thinking about this moment as maybe the moment to like intentionally the integrative process. Like now we've already experienced the peak, but this is maybe the moment where we start to go, okay, like how do I even acknowledge like the lifespan of whatever was born in that Kazemi moment. Like, how do we kind of like let that go in a sense and like integrate everything we've learned so we can start the cycle again?
It's like a full moon moment, but for the outer planets.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I also like to think about when you're halfway through a retrograde, you know, you're especially, this is especially true for the inner planets of Mercury and Venus, because they have another Kazemi with the sun rather than having an opposition with the sun. So they had their inferior Kazemi at that point. And so that's this internal process of, what have I learned through the retrograde so far? And now that I know this, what am I going to do with, like, how am I going to be constructive through the rest of this retrograde? Because they do have that sort of internal rebirth. Here, it's, what have I learned? What tools do I have? And how am I going to make use of them so that I can be prepared when we emerge again from the rays of, or from being retrograde, and when I'm feeling productive again. So it's like, how am I biding my energy to make sure it's ready for when we move direct?
Yeah. And I can't help but think, looking at that, like, retrograde is a moment of maybe sickness or wobbliness, or like when you're not quite in your health and you're staring out to the world. And it's almost like, oh, like this sort of re-examining how we see the world through ourselves, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
Something
it's that
about
moment
it is like a moment of illness or something, or shakiness.
Yeah. It's, you know, that moment when you have to admit that it's okay to rest, you know, where you stop pushing.
I can't do it, Dad. I can't do it.
Yeah. It's not who I am. It's not a phase, but it actually is. So
Yeah.
oh, yeah. But this too does pass. Do we want to look at the emergence from retrograde at this point? So then we go back into looking into Jupiter again. And again, this is just easier to find.
And by the way, that we were just talking about was early December for those who are interested. Like, kind of keep it.
So really quickly, this was December 8th. We'll be at curtailed passage halfway through that. That I think it started in October, the retrograde that began in October. Now we have to go all the way to February. And it's notable to say, like, in February, by this point, there's so much else happening in the sky too. And we're only looking at Jupiter right now. So, you know, Jupiter has been in retrograde. In the meantime, Mercury has gone in and out of retrograde. In the meantime, Mars is now getting ready to wrap up a retrograde as well. We'll do that by the end of February. But this is Jupiter having the moment of going direct.
I love the sky. I love the sky because someone else. There's some moment of hope there. Jupiter, thank you, the moment of hope.
Yeah, Jupiter is like, hey, Mars retrograde, that's been intense, huh? Here's a little bit of like less weight on you. Have you noticed, speaking of the astrology of 2025, which I've lightly looked at only because we've been planning trips, Mars finishes retrograde at the end of February. We get 5 days of grace between that and Venus going through her retrograde. Like, it just doesn't seem fair. And this is the quandary of the astrologer, right? Is it worse that you know this far in advance, or are you glad you have the time to prepare?
It's just a lot of introspection. I mean, I'm teasing, because the world is big and there's, you know, we all need to take action too. But yeah, we don't have to think about that, right? That's the beautiful thing too. We can also come back to the present moment and like, why is this, what happened at 11 degrees? My brain's just like recently at a transit 11. And is it touching this? There was an 11 degree transit something. Wasn't something, or am I making this up?
No, I think there was actually. So do you mind if I bring it back to the present, as you said?
Yeah.
We can see who's close to the 11 degree thing now and just kind of look into that.
Oh, it was the Saturn. It was that Saturn Mercury Kazemi moment. That Saturn, that thing was a
conjunction. Yeah.
That was 11 degrees Pisces. So when Jupiter emerges, Jupiter's going to square that point.
Square that. Yeah.
So, which means for people, I'll let you take that over. Yeah, we can go back.
So it was, are you saying Saturn's cazimi with the sun, or are we saying Saturn Mercury conjunction was at the 11 degree?
Wasn't it then we had the Saturn, because it was the Mercury cazimi, but then Saturn was there too, that 11 degrees. It was just like the sad fuck up. That's all I remember it as.
Yeah. So if Jupiter is going to square that same point, just like a birth chart, every moment continues living afterwards. Even after death, we see charts continuing to do their thing. So if the moment of that Mercury cazimi with the sun in Pisces, witnessed by Saturn,
February,
back in February, took place at the 11th degree. When Jupiter goes direct, Jupiter is going to be squaring that point. So what we could feasibly say is that there might be a callback, perhaps a good thing comes up. What happened during that Mercury cazimi in Pisces from this past February? Jupiter just saying, hey, remember this memory over here? I do too. And now it feels nostalgic in a good way because Jupiter might be saying, I'm going to bring some kind of, maybe communication, or maybe a new agreement, or maybe something very Gemini, maybe new allies or alliances or connections that make the things that happen at that time a little bit better, or at least make them make more sense.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because at that point in time, it was in Pisces, so it's Jupiter's sign, and Mercury was there, and it was just that like sad Mercury moment where everyone's like, "Oh, Jupiter and Pisces," like it just felt so emotionally charged and heavy, and so there is something kind of sweet about now Jupiter visible, making this kind of making this declaration in Gemini. So maybe there is some like thought that we can like this intellectual moment that we can have like some hindsight to make sense of all of that felt like that emotional goo.
Yeah. Like, hey, that happened and it wasn't comfortable, but since then we've come this far and look at us go.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, we found something sweet to like hold.
We did. That's very in tune with the energy of the Jupiter cazimi and the lovely Sagittarian full moon coming up. Yay. Ending it on a high note.
So we have like a few moments. Do you want to just like tell us your favorite things about this full moon?
Yeah, sure. Let me show it to you because I think I've messed around with this a little bit. So I'm going to come and find it so we can look at the chart.
By the way, for those watching the video, which is all of you right now who are watching, I just dumped tea on myself.
Are you okay?
I'm totally okay. I'm still
So what we've got with this full moon, the full moon occurs in Sagittarius. So we showed earlier that the moon will first oppose these two here. And it doesn't really filter it out because there's so much going on here. But Venus and Jupiter are conjunct on this same day, just hours before this full moon that occurs in Sagittarius, which is ruled by Jupiter. So, you get a Jupiter ruled full moon and Jupiter's not yet in detriment. So Jupiter's still doing all right. Jupiter's got Venus nearby. He's leaving Uranus in the dust and has already been sort of blessed and is in the rebirth process with the sun. Venus has yet to meet with the sun because, again, if we look at this is one of those cool moments where Jupiter, the sun is getting away from, but Venus is quickly catching up with the sun. So it's two planets at the same degree entering two kind of almost opposite kind of phases. One is going away from the cazimi and one is approaching it, even though they're at the same degree. It's so crazy to think about. So thinking about this full moon, what I want to encourage people is if you're doing your own personal practice with this, the word manifesting is a fine word to use, but also think about what you want. Think about if nothing was in your way and you had the freedom to dream big, what would you dream of for yourself? And how do the resources around you perhaps support that already in ways that you didn't anticipate yet? Because we are seeing Jupiter in Taurus with Venus. So these resources that may already be abundant, or the dreams you can build with what's around you so that you don't have to feel the sense of lack.
I love that. It almost just like looking at this and seeing that the moon, again, making this before, like the moment before we get the full moon, making that opposition, right? It almost feels like it's translating its light to, it's like translating its light to Gemini. And then it makes me think in a sense, like I love this idea of like, what do you want? Because it feels like we're sealing, it's like we're sealing that whole Taurus experience with this protective seal. We could say sealed with a kiss, right?
I was going to say, let's swack this. Yeah. Yeah, because later this day, Venus also does come into Gemini.
Yeah, so that moment, the prestige just feels very sweet. It's a moment of like, okay, like what do you want to lock in? This is all that we've been working in, like sealing in the goodness of Taurus before we move on to the chaos of Gemini.
Yeah, and thank you. Pattern Scribe on Instagram is saying excellent moon insights. Glad you approve. It's a nice feeling to have. Yeah.
And oh
So,
man,
and with that, yeah, that's a great point to sort of round it out on that optimistic note.
yes, and there was someone in the chat who was asking about putting their birth time, and I should say that these we do every week. We'll answer general astrology questions, but if you have a birth chart question, you can go to askmeastros.com, submit your question, submit your birth time, and if we choose your question, we will respond to it in a podcast recording, which we do once a month.
Yeah, we'll actually do a full-on reading for you in a live podcast recording. We'll keep it anonymous for the reading, but don't worry. We do send you codes to get free readings with us each individually. So you'll get even more insight. It's like 3 readings happening. It's pretty cool. And thank you, Angela. Yeah, awesome.
Yeah, and what's going on? How can people find you?
Yeah.
What's the story?
So find me at KristaLyn and Sofia, mostly on Instagram, also on TikTok. I hang out with people and get so super thrilled engaging with people most at the Patreon. There are free tiers and all those things. But I have so much fun there. And I will be at NORWAC this weekend. And I've got some more announcements coming out over the next few weeks that I can't talk about yet.
Nice. And yeah, I'm Vivi Henriette on Instagram. I'm really follow me on Substack. That's where I tend to make all my podcast announcements, my interviews.
You're just such a good writer. Sorry, I had to I made that noise because I was reading your recent one about the I think you were at a certain conference or whatever, and you were thinking about Jupiter and Taurus and those kinds of things. And I just loved it. They're very digestible and they're beautifully written. And I highly recommend everybody go to Vivi's Substack and subscribe, even if you just want to read something lovely every once in a while with incredible insight.
That means so much. Thank you so much. And we'll probably do something maybe random.
Yes.
We'll pop on the internet at NORWAC. So
yeah.
Gorgeous day, everyone. And
yeah.
bye.